Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Kimberly Tan and I will be your host for today's program that we call Events in the New Normal. Firstly, what is this virtual event all about? Well, we'll be discussing pertinent issues that affect the events industry in these unprecedented times. COVID-19 has stopped crowd gatherings to prioritize our health, and for good reason. With the spread of the virus coming back in second or even third waves, even in countries that were supposedly clear of it before, such as New Zealand or South Korea, it is safe to say that we cannot let our guard down until a vaccine is found and the virus is eliminated. Event venues and exhibition halls, such as Suntec City behind me, have been rendered ghost towns since the start of circuit breaker measures. Even after phase 2 reopenings, they've still remained vacant, as events such as weddings only allow up to 50 guests. However, slowly but surely, we will be seeing the gradual reopening of physical events with bigger crowds, but with stricter measures such as social distancing and separation among groups. For example, in October, the Singapore Tourism Board will be allowing events of up to 250 people. We've all seen the damage that COVID-19 does, and experts around the world have chipped in on what we can do to make the situation a little bit better. What we're doing here today is looking at the steps that we can take in the events industry moving forward and maybe make that process a little bit easier. Today, we'll be doing two things. Firstly, we'll look at the different formats that you can use for your online event. For example, the use of recordings, live chat platforms such as Zoom, in-person interviews and presentations are just some of the ways that you can convey your message to your audience. Today, it is your chance to see which of these formats you might want to use for your own virtual event. And secondly, we'll be bringing you some useful information and opinions from our speakers and panelists today. Some of the topics that we will be covering include the benefits of running an online event, how to improve the production value of your online event, how to make them look more professional, as well as a look at the costs behind running a virtual live event. We'll also be sharing some safety tips on how to run physical on-site events once they're allowed. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and I'll see you back in the studio right after this.
The MICE industry is constantly evolving, more immersive experiences, and more effective connections.
Authorities are rushing to contain the outbreak.
The total number of cases now stands at 33.
We will therefore impose significantly stricter measures.
Confirmed with them that the Tokyo Olympics will not be cancelled, but will only be postponed.
This year's Singapore Formula One night race has been cancelled because of COVID-19.
Singapore is not returning to a pre-COVID-19 world.
More major events have now joined the mass coronavirus cancellation list,
changing up their plans to attend large gatherings.
Workers have been working remotely from home where they can, using the latest digital tools available to them.
Two pilot events will be the first to trial new guidelines for the safe resumption of MICE events amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
Plans are underway for them to resume gradually and safely under the STB's risk management framework.
To build a new economy, we have to start now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us live today on a Friday morning for our session, Events in the New Normal. My name is Kim, and I'll be guiding you through today's program. During this live session, you'll be taken through a series of various formats that you can use in your live events. We're also going to be speaking to various industry professionals to get some helpful tips on how you can run a successful online event. Earlier this week, I spoke to a panel of experts on the benefits of running an event online. Let's hear from them now. Hi, welcome to our panel discussion on the benefits of hosting an online event. During the discussion, please feel free to comment with any questions that you might have on the right side of your screen using the chat portal that you are on right now. And of course, we'll be having a live Q&A discussion with our panelists in the studio right after this. So I'd like to start off with introducing everyone who's with me here today. Beside me, we have Annie Tay. Annie is the content marketing specialist over at Pigeonhole Live, which is Singapore's premier audience interaction tech partner. Yes. And beside her, we have Wendy Ho. Wendy Ho, of course, from Artist E, the leading artist management agency specializing in representing event hosts in Singapore. And all the way at the end, we have Mr. Jerry Koh. Jerry is a senior lecturer over at the Singapore Institute of Technology, and he's here as an expert on the education industry, especially the hospitality sector, talking about how this has changed the lives of his students and what they're learning in this time period. So I just want to start off by mentioning that we are at SIT at Republic Polytechnic. So thank you so much, Jerry, for allowing us to be here.
You're welcome.
Jerry, could we start off with finding out how the industry has changed for yourself and your students in this time period?
I think when we're looking at the educational industry, to a large extent, it has remained very, very stable. The thing that has changed with the current pandemic is actually the method of teaching and the method of learning on the part of the students. But if you look at the concept of hybrid and blended learning, educational workshops and so forth, they've actually been proceeding for quite a long time already. And then when you deal with online courses such as Coursera, even your Ivy League universities have been doing that for quite a long time. So we've had to adjust quite a bit during the first part when we had the circuit breaker. Students were actually confined to learning from home, but we've since opened up, and then with your safety measures built in, we have classes of less than 50 students. Some of my project groups now have been confined to only 5 packs, so it's a bit challenging actually.
Right. And Annie, you know, you're from Pigeonhole Live and you work a lot with providing solutions for audience interactions, technology and stuff like that. So how is the industry like right now, considering that you're working with this sector specifically?
Well, it's definitely changed quite a bit. We actually have had virtual and hybrid events before that we used to support, but the demand right now has definitely gone up way much. A lot of the conferences that we used to support are being cancelled, sadly, but we are seeing a lot of event planners who are stepping up to innovate. They're looking at all the different tech options that are available to them, and they're really trying to find new ways to engage the audiences, which is quite heartening.
Right. Wendy, you work directly with events MCs who are, you know, on the other end of things. You know, they are coming in and they have to host these events that are so different. How has it changed for you in the past few months?
A lot of our MCs have a piece-to-camera experience, so they're very used to doing broadcasts, so they're very, very comfortable in front of a camera. It's a different skill altogether when you're on stage and doing a live event. There's floor craft, you have to engage an audience, but this time around you're just looking straight into a camera and you're speaking. So most of our MCs were very, very familiar with it. So there's not that much of a transition. It's just that I think with events right now, a lot of clients are not quite sure what they want and how they want their show to look. Because right now we are going back to TV style. We're projecting to one person. So just imagine your laptop, 13-inch, 15-inch or whatever, that's just particularly to one person. So you have to broadcast for that method rather than broadcasting to 3,000 in front of you or even 200 in front of you.
And that's very interesting because I assume that it would shift the way that you teach your students, Jerry, about how the hospitality industry works now. If you're presenting to a certain crowd, you know, if you're working in this business, it's very different. So has it affected the way or what you teach your students?
In terms of content, actually not. But the ability to say do field trips and internships obviously has been adversely affected. But within the classroom itself, I think the thing that I sorely miss as a lecturer is the lively interaction and the ability to look at body language cues and check whether students really understand or otherwise. So I think the method of teaching is forced upon us, and everybody is hoping to go back to, sort of the old way of doing things. But now, as I mentioned, with your safety measures and 1 meter apart, it becomes very, very challenging. The time taken to cover a content for a lesson is much lengthier. So you got to build in all your extra timing because you got to see whether 50 people or 40 people on a Zoom format is actually following the lesson or not. Yeah. So there's a lot of hits and misses here and there for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I really actually agree. because I've been doing some lessons and all that via Zoom, right? It's really difficult to interject when a teacher or lecturer is talking or whatever, because like in class they can see you and they can motion to you very quickly. Now you have to raise hand, wait for the teacher to say, okay, please, Wendy, ask your question, kind of thing. All right, so I think that interaction I really feel is missing. And like you said, it takes a longer time to cover whatever you need to cover, because I find that, when I actually go for a course or a 3-day course, it takes like within the 4 hours, we can cover quite a lot of things. When someone asks a question, we can also get visual cues, from the lecturer and the rest of the participants. But for a Zoom call, it's just really, really difficult.
No, and that's interesting because it's a full-on like a virtual setting, right? Where it doesn't feel very much like natural human interaction anymore. So I wanted to ask you, Annie, in terms of providing solutions, audience interaction and engagement, is there anything that can be done or that Pigeonhole Live does do to help out with this?
Yeah, definitely. I think for one thing, I think it's a lot of reimagining what interaction could be like. So definitely a lot of the human interaction that is missed, it cannot be replicated directly, but there is a lot of kind of like new ways that you can do it. So for example, having more engagement activities, like I did a course recently where they just kept doing polls in the middle just to check up on the students to say like, okay, so are we on the same track? Are we doing the same thing? There's also like having just structured Q&As where people can put in questions as the lesson is going, and then having a Q&A session after that to go like, okay, so let's go through each question one by one. The learning can still be quite fluid and quite possible. So we have a ton of different interactive sessions that you can just pick and choose. It's almost like fitting together like a little puzzle to fit the event for the kind of interaction that you're looking for.
Right, like just the understanding that it needs to be beyond just a person on a screen talking to, the wide audience. There has to be more, right? Yeah. Or it's just, it's not reasonable, it doesn't feel the same, right? Yeah. Jerry, I'd like to ask you, before the pandemic started versus now, do you as an educator, as you are speaking to your students, do you find difficulty in connecting with them on the screen?
Not really, because I think in the past, we've actually video recorded all of our lectures, even though we have live sessions. And the rationale for video recording is for students who want to revise before the exams and so forth. But one method of teaching insofar as the classroom setup is concerned, I've been an adult educator for about 20 over years, and as opposed to lecturing to a group of students sitting in rows and rows of tables and chairs, I've always organized cluster seatings. And then within each cluster, we provide them flip chart papers in order to give their input. And this is where you get a lot of physical movement actually around the room. All of that is gone, right? And then in this week, I just conducted a lesson where we used brain dominance color cards. And one of my biggest challenges was with everybody handling the card, would I need to provide hand sanitizers for everybody? So I think we're obviously going into uncharted territories. A lot of the things are still very unknown, and we're sort of taking baby steps as we go along. So very definitely it's very challenging, but as far as the delivery is concerned, I think that part has not changed.
Right. It's the understanding that the pandemic, when you're trying to run events or teach classes or whatever it is, it's the small little things that are so difficult these days. Wendy, when you're in charge of your MCs, when you go down to the events or when you're running or planning the events, do you see a big difference between what you used to have to do versus now?
Definitely. So when I do a lot of show calling as well, so we actually have a table set up and gridded, and we put each of the speakers' names or host names, and we have plastic bags, Ziploc bags, tissue, wet wipes, the works, right? And we didn't realize how important that was to the speakers until the speakers came in and they went, oh wow, this is cool, great. I can put my mask down and all that kind of stuff. And they appreciated the extra mile that we went. Even when we swap out microphones and all that, we would do a wet wipe, alcohol wipe over it, just to give people the ease of mind. I mean, some people say, just like, it look like play acting only. But I guess, in this day and age, you kind of don't know who's infected, right? So you want to make sure that you are kind of clean and healthy, not because of anything, but because you go home to a family. Right. Most people live with a family of sorts. Even if you're single, you would hang out with friends and all that. You don't want to be the one to pass the virus to anyone. You don't want to be, patient zero or one of those things, So you want to be careful for yourself as well as also for your family. So when we do go down to do a shoot or anything like that, anything that we use, anything that our host would be using, microphone sanitized, we just make sure that we're extra clean and hygienic.
Right. And so, because there's now all these extra steps to be taking, right? Whether it's filming or an event itself. And so, Annie, I wanted to ask you, if clients or, anyone, educators decide to move their event or course to an online version, a virtual version, what do you see as the benefits of doing that?
Oh, there are tons actually. For one, there's so much more data available to you. Let's say if you look at a kind of like in-person conference that you used to run, people are just all over the place. They're making connections organically. You can kind of like look into the room and kind of have a sense that like, okay, things are going well. But when you do a virtual conference, you can count the number of touch points, the amount of time that people spend on the platform, how long they're watching a certain video, and based off of the engagement activities that you have online, like how many times they engage. So you can have a very clear picture of how your event is going. Like Picture Whole Life also has this one where you can rate how well a question is being asked and answered,
right,
with like a smiley face or a frowny face. So that also gives you an idea of like, you can rate your panelists to see like how well are we doing. Yeah.
Right. So it's like a data thing. You can now actually get proper physical data from your sessions.
Yes, and the data is like so much more available out there depending on the type of event tech partners that you choose to engage with.
Right, right. And so Jerry, for yourself, whether, in your personal opinion or what you share with your students, what do you think are the benefits of moving online these days?
They're very similar to what you mentioned, the ability to capture more data and so forth. But whether that additional data translate into additional learning, that can only be determined when we do the final assessment. But I think the benefits of going online, obviously, if you have a particular lecture like this week, I'll be covering communication styles whereby they have to do a self-assessment. So a lot of things that we normally would do in class, they can do online. So when they come into class, then immediately we can jump into sort of the analysis and the discussions and so forth. The other benefit, of course, is with online learning, you actually increase the amount of self-directed learning on the part of the student. So again, these are new territories that we can maybe capitalize on to see whether we could let students handle part of their learning process and not have everything sort of directed by the instructor. So you move from the old sage on the stage to a guide by the side, part and parcel of what adult education is. So whether it's the formal educational setting in a university or you're running an executive training workshop, I think the whole process of learning is taking on very, very new paradigms that, as we mentioned earlier, we're taking baby steps, and I think the sharing is very important. So for us in education to share from the MICE industry professionals to see what are some of the cues and tips that we can take from them, and then we can interchange accordingly. So, it's very definitely a sharing among everybody, all the different stakeholders.
And speaking of sharing, Wendy, I have a very interesting question for you. So for all the MCs that you work with, now that it's shifted and a lot of things are maybe in front of a camera, whereas maybe previously, I know you mentioned that a lot of them have face-to-camera experience, but maybe previously they were used to working with crowds, your dinners and stuff like that. Do you see them preferring this new virtual, style where they have a chance to record and, maybe mess up and do that take again, or do they prefer the actual stage setup?
I don't think there's really a preference for everyone. It's a different feel. If you like doing dinner and dances, for example, you definitely need to have the live element, right? Then you suck the energy from the audience and then you give it out again as a host.
Right.
But I think for a lot of the events that we do now, it's very conference-based. I've had very few product launches. Even if they're just like little commercials, whether it's a car launch or whatever, you just have one person who's hosting it with maybe the boss or whatever, you're talking about the car. And it's very TV commercial-like, it's maybe a 10-minute little slot kind of thing. So I think there really isn't that much of a difference, with the exception of D&Ds, for example, that you need the audience perspective.
Right. A lot of people watching us right now, joining us for the session today, they're in the industry, either as students, budding, going into it in this strange time. So I'd like to go around the panel and ask everyone, based on your experience, the industry that you're in, what tips you can give them to adapt to this, new normal with a lot of virtual/online events. So let's start with Annie.
Well, coming from a event tech provider, like my advice would just be to look at your options. There are so many different types of event tech kind of like partners and tools that you can use. Like we've actually had a lot of partnerships ourselves with like video solution providers like Bright Cove, Cultura, Cisco WebEx, or even like event management and event marketing tools. A lot of them can do the work for you, the things that you assume will be very manual. So that takes a lot of the stress out of planning to do a virtual event by yourself.
Right. And Wendy, maybe your advice for either people who are trying to run events or people who are hosting events like MCs.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know whether I can say anything about running the events. I'm more of a show caller, but I think it takes a lot more effort right now. It actually takes more manpower. More man hours, a lot more laptops, a lot of cameramen to come into play. Actually, when I used to be from TCS. Oh, well, now it's MediaCorp, right? That's how old I am. But when I left, I thought, okay, I'll leave production behind. I do live events now. And like 3 months ago, I got pulled back, into doing producing work for TV, Yeah. So I guess when a lot of people kind of thought that TV production as a cause is kind of play. I think now they're taking production people a bit more seriously, and they understand the grief that we go through to make a TV drama or a film. I've got event producers telling me that they've gone out to do a shoot and people are honking. The TV screen comes up with videos that have audio. Grab riders streaming by with whatever pop Thai music kind of thing. So I think they're getting to appreciate what production really is about, because that is what a lot of the events are going to be very much like productions.
Right, and this is something that you studied back in school as well. It's a skill that maybe you thought, I can leave it behind for a while, go into live events, and then suddenly you have no choice, right? You have to use these old school skills that you picked up on. So Jerry, as an educator, I'd like to ask you, in terms of people who are still going through their studies, maybe they are still very fresh in the hospitality industry. What sort of tips can you give them on how to adapt? Maybe they never studied these skills before. How can they adapt to this new world?
I think probably by attending a lot of webinars to see how other people are doing it, learning the ropes. For myself, who have been in education for quite a while, what I try to do is to take what has worked previously in face-to-face sessions and then try to convert it into an online format. So if you have sort of cluster, small group learnings, you have interactive exercises, I think all of those translate at the end of the day to your main objective. And the main objective is actually no longer teacher or instructor focused, but learner focused. So if you can go in and sort of build in, as we said, enough time to really tackle each and every learner, then I think, you're sort of halfway there. But one thing I realized also, besides the fact that we normally would deliver the lecture component and then we have a group discussion, is that because now if things are done online, I don't have a chance to actually interact with all 49 students in the class. And because of that, we've actually created WhatsApp groups. And now I get students, sort of messaging me right up to midnight and all that. So I find, you really have to, but I mean, that's part and parcel of the sort of the whole mission of teaching. And it has been challenging, juggling time and so forth. But I think if we have a chance, and we haven't had enough surveys to actually find how the students evaluate this new method of learning, I think we are not completely there yet, but we are making progress in the right direction. So it's still challenging, but very tiring.
Jerry, you might be tired of answering questions from your students, but unfortunately, right now we're going to move on to answering questions to our audience in the studio. So thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you very much, Wendy and Annie as well. And we'll see you back in the studio after this for our live Q&A with our panelists. Hi, welcome back to our studio, and thank you very much for all the questions that you sent over during our panel discussion. So actually, right now, we still have our 3 panelists. They are here live with us to answer any questions that you might have, and just want to remind you that you can still continue to send yours as the Q&A goes along. So I want to say good morning to Jerry, Annie, and Wendy. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi there.
All right, now I wanted to ask you guys, in your different corners around Singapore, wherever you're calling in from, the first question today comes from me. Agree or disagree, the best part about virtual events is that you can do Q&As from home. Is that true?
Oh, definitely.
Yes, one of the big benefits. All right, now we do have some questions here today. First one, I believe, is directed at Jerry. This is for you. Wenchi asks, do you feel that online and home-based learning is going to be here to stay?
Probably, I think not in its entirety. I think everybody would like things to go back to the old way. So we may not have completely online learning, but I think what is important to realize is some of the things that we have learned during this pandemic situation with home-based learning, online learning, and all that. Some of the benefits definitely would still prevail, and I think we can still use some of those things. So things like Annie mentioned about polling, the interactive activities, gamification. I think all those are elements that surely can enhance learning in whichever format you have.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Jacqueline. Jacqueline, I believe this is for Wendy. So Wendy, the question is, on your end, in your personal opinion, have you leaned towards preferring live or recorded sessions for your MCs, if you could choose?
For virtual events itself, I would say, I prefer live.
Oh.
I think the live element is actually quite important because, you can pre-record a lot of things, but if you're doing like a Q&A session or if you're doing a live portion just before the links, then I think you need to be able to listen to what the person is saying and then reacting to it, right? And just say, thank you, Mr. Ho, and then continue with introducing this person, rather than it's like, oh, that was a very interesting point that Mr. Ho brought up, blah, 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 and then continue with the next link. So I think that I like the live thing a bit more. Of course, when you pre-record, you have a lot more control over lighting, how you sound, you don't like what the MC said, redo until you're happy, that kind of thing. So, there's a good and bad for both, but I prefer live.
And at this point, I'd like to say, that was very interesting, Wendy, to show that I'm listening. See?
Yes, see, exactly. So you can continue the conversation from there, right?
Right.
That's the whole life aspect that Jerry also mentioned, right, during the earlier session, that, there's a lot of interaction that needs to be there when we are actually live in person.
Yeah, absolutely. The little moments that you miss if it's all pre-recorded. Thank you very much, Wendy.
Yeah.
So next question comes from Andrea. Andrea, thank you for your question. This is for Annie. So Annie, in your opinion, same question for Jerry, do you personally see events staying online from your end of the business, or actually do you see a more hybrid version coming up in the next few years?
This is a good question. I think one thing to note is that virtual events and hybrid events they're not new to this time and age. They existed even before the pandemic. It just, because of what happened, it's just the timeline of adoption has been expedited. But definitely, I would see a lot more of a hybrid version coming up as kind of like quarantine controls kind of loosen up. And what I think would happen is that there will be a wider variety of types of events that we should be expecting. So the definitions of what virtual is and what hybrid is going to start evolving, and the lines might actually start getting a bit more blurred because, like Jerry and Wendy said this, there is a kind of people are missing the human interaction, people are missing the kind of engagement, and what that engagement looks like is going to continue to evolve over time.
Absolutely. And I believe this might be our final question, we'll see, but this comes from Matthias. So Matthias, this is for Jerry again. Jerry, do you have any tips to how you make online classes or courses more enjoyable if it's all virtual?
I think what we mentioned earlier about interactive exercises, the ability to convert what is normally a face-to-face activity into an online activity. Within SIT, not in my particular division, but in other divisions, they're already implementing gamification modules. There's one in allied health where they actually created a scenario of an accident in the lab. There was a fire, and subsequently, some of the people were injured. And what the students have to do is actually to go through it as a mystery-solving puzzle to determine what were the causes of the fire, who was injured, and probably who was the culprit who started the fire. And from there, move on into a sort of a learning process and says, in future, if we were to have that kind of a situation, what would you do? So I think when we look into this, I've created one exercise before on a treasure hunt, which was actually meant for another module. And what the learners have to do is actually to look for the answers, and the answers are actually planted in various texts within the PowerPoint slide. So in a way, it forces them to go through the lesson, without me having to sort of provide the answers. So it's a little bit of challenge to see how else can we figure things out for these people.
Jerry, that was honestly a much more fun answer than I expected. I want to join your course now. I'll talk to you after this to find out how I can. And this next question comes from Kat. Thank you, Kat. I believe this is most relevant for Wendy. She asks, as a show caller, do you find it easier to show call for online or on-site events? That's interesting. And do they require the same skill sets, or is it very different these days?
I think it's very different, actually, because online you really have whatever you just see in front of you. I mean, for us, it's whatever you're actually looking at on a screen, right? It's usually a 13-inch or 15-inch laptop kind of thing. But live events, you can see really 360. You know when the dude there is sleeping on the back rows, or you see people walking in through the doors, it's going to slam. You can see a lot more things, you can hear a lot more things, you feel 360. Rather than actually just, from one camera angle, which is really all that you're actually interested in, because that camera angle is what goes to the audience, right? So I think I actually much prefer live events, but the difference is quite vast.
Well, that's interesting, Wendy, because I think I saw Annie laughing as you were explaining that. So I think it's because we all know that beyond our screens, all the mess of the house is there right now, and everything here is clean.
Oh, definitely.
But, yeah, that's another benefit of an online event. And Rochelle, this is directly for Annie. She asks, how is Pigeonhole's event tech solution different from some others that you've been seeing maybe on the market these days?
Okay, well, that's a bit of a tough question because there are a lot of different types of event tech tools out there. Pigeonhole Live solutions are specifically made for audience interaction. So we are audience interaction tool that uses interactive sessions like live Q&As, live polls, chats, and even quizzes, sort of like gamification that Jerry was talking about earlier, to enable meaningful conversations in different situations. So we're very customizable, I would say, that we can fit all sorts of different types of situations. So we do global town hall meetings to even classroom settings or virtual conferences and lead nurturing webinars. That's why we always encourage people who have specific event needs to come and talk to us specifically. Like if you have an image in mind, an idea in mind, and you're not sure how to execute your vision, you can come to us and we can advise you and even tailor a package for you to suit your needs.
Thank you very much, Annie. That's really useful. I think Rochelle might be your next client, so thank you for that. And last one is from Jasmine. This one, Jasmine says that this question is for all speakers, so please feel free to answer for everyone here. Her question is webinars versus dialogue sessions. What do you think between those two, webinars, dialogue sessions, what is the better choice for an online audience? Let's start off with maybe Jerry first.
I think it depends on the purpose of the particular event. Webinars will probably be more suited towards delivering of certain materials, certain information for maybe certain association professionals and all that. Dialogue, I think, is actually more of an sort of an interaction, especially when people want to see what is the reaction of a particular community to recent geopolitical events and so forth. So I think the dialogue part is good if you really want an updated information, whereas the other is actually to a large extent providing sort of a lot of information for, say, maybe a particular field or a particular discipline.
Right, okay. And Wendy, what is your opinion on this?
You can tell I really like live more than anything else from the conversations we've had. So I think I like the dialogue part, because the dialogue part, like Jerry said, it's really present, it's very current. There is a bit more life to it than, let me just give you a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I can Google anything right now. But usually I would much prefer to hear from the experts what they thought, and I think having the Q&A segment is very important, because we don't know what you don't know or the audience doesn't know, right? So it's great when the audience comes with questions, and sometimes you're like, oh wow, okay, I never thought that was a problem, but obviously someone is having that problem, and that's why the question has come in. So I much prefer the whole dialogue portion of it, because frankly, any PowerPoint presentation, just Google it.
Absolutely, and that's the difference between a YouTube video and what you guys are doing now, so thank you. And same question to Annie, would you prefer a webinar or dialogue session?
Well, I'll definitely prefer a dialogue session, just because I'm a huge advocate of two-way conversations, two-way interactions, instead of just a one-way. I'm sitting in front of a computer staring at a video talking at me. I love to have that interaction, and even seeing what kind of new interactions can come out of that. If people in the chat right now are having conversations of their own, they're having their own opinions about what going virtual means to them, or their personal experiences, that adds so much value. But at the same time, I think webinars can definitely have that interactive element if you have the right tools to go with it.
Absolutely, fair point. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Jerry, Wendy, and Annie, for being with us this Friday morning. And thanks for everything that you've shared with our audience today. Now, of course, we are out of time for this Q&A session, but again, thank you to our three panelists for joining us and for sharing all that they feel and know about the industry these days. If you've just joined us, welcome to our session. It is called Events in the New Normal. My name is Kim, and I will be guiding you through the rest of the program. Now, we are living in an era where so much of our professional discussions, our activities are conducted over video meetings, and having a professional outlook in your virtual event is really important these days. So I had a chance to speak to Augustine Chetty, who is a production manager for special events, on what can be done to better manage this. Hi Chetty, thank you so much for talking to us today. So maybe to start off for everyone at home, could you tell us what sort of events you've done in the past?
Mainly more on the technical side for events, what we call AV, audio-visual. And for the sort of events that we've done, it's mostly conferences, corporate conferences, launches, awards. And then on the more lifestyle side, we've done a couple of both local and international live concerts. But currently, in these times, we're focused mainly on B2B live streams.
So, you're here today to talk to us about production value. So what exactly do you mean by this term production value?
I think to me, it is when you or your client decides on a venue, it is how to actually extract the maximum potential of that event space. And by that, I mean keeping in mind that you most likely will need to use some specialized equipment in order to, create the impact and, to build retention of the message, create memories, and at the same time, the priority would be to, ensure that the clarity of the main message of the event is being carried through.
So Chetty, what do you mean by production value? As in last time when you're doing on-site live events, right? How do you use this concept of production value to enhance those events?
I think straight off the top, on the surface level, definitely it will be easy for people to see that we've actually increased the sort of, if I may call it, professionalism and the outlook of the event. And then after that, we can actually look at creating moments of impact by utilizing our technology and equipment. By that, I mean at the points of the high points where we actually throw out certain effects, special effects. And then with that, we actually use that to create memories. I think that is very important, because when you create memories, it equates to being able to retain the message of the event for a longer time, and just to make it easier for audiences to remember the event.
If you could give us an example based on, your years of doing live events for different types of clients, do you have any memory of how a specific equipment or, a specific special effect that you did was successful in creating a memory for that brand?
I think, especially in Singapore, it's very easy to tell when the audience just comes alive with you at that moment of impact. So that's when we know we've done the right thing. And if you talk about what did we do, I think that is not as important as doing the right thing at the right moment. Yeah, and this could mean the whole range of things, from fireworks, from sparks, confettis, balloon drops, even smoke machines. Yeah, so these are all the different applications we can call upon, but actually creatively doing it at the right time and the right place at the right moment is the key.
And so everything that you mentioned, like fireworks and confetti and all that, those are very much live things that, either you can't do online or it doesn't have the same impact, So in your experience recently doing a lot of live virtual events, what is the production value that you then insert into these virtual events?
Yeah, I think for virtual events, we have to take almost a totally, entirely new outlook to it. We have to consider a couple of things that, like you mentioned, easily we can forget about doing fireworks and all those sorts of things. But I think if we look at it from another point of view, virtual world allows us certain opportunities that we don't have in the live traditional setting. In fact, you're talking things about having a green screen, right? You can't possibly put that up in a live event; it will look funny. But right now, I think we can finally say we're able to do something green screen live. And when we maximize the potential of that, I think it creates a really different and visually impactful kind of setting where you're not talking about just maybe branding or motion graphics, but you're talking about 3D as well that's coming to life, making it seem that they're really in a virtual world. Yeah, so I think if we look at it from that point of view, there are a couple of things that we can actually do by using or just tapping into the virtual world to carry out. Now, for us, when we go from our traditional live events to something virtual, I think we need to not only utilize our existing equipment, but we actually need to look out for alternative methods to do certain things that becomes more of a priority when it comes to virtual world. We're talking about things like, because it's online, we're talking about things like stability. We need actually a lot more redundancies than in a live setting, because in the online world, a lot of things can actually go wrong, and it's very easily cut off by an outage in the internet and that sort of things, right? So we're looking at alternative methods to make it safe. And that's a priority. And then after that, we then look at what sort of, for example, virtual effects can we throw in, what sort of connections can we make? Because the whole point of this is for remote speakers to actually join in the event. When we talk about the transferring what we've done live into virtual, we also need to look at things that used to be simple to us. For example, simultaneous interpretation. That sort of things, Q&As, interactivity with the audience, that has to be looked at with an entirely different approach in order for us to carry it out.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned that because, with events moving online and then you have speakers who are sometimes recording themselves, not even from the same country, and they're usually in their own house and stuff like that, right? So previously, when I was doing live events, you would always have people like you, like guys in the AV team, the crew to be there to sort all these equipment issues out. And now there's a lot of the responsibility has been placed on the speakers themselves to somehow have, proper lighting at home, you choose your background at home, you have to be the one to set things up. So as an event organizer yourself, you run these things from behind the scenes, what can you do for the guests who don't have this experience? What can they do from home? You
can start off with a simple, I think, information pack. For example, just just to go through a couple of things for them to keep it simple so that anyone can carry it out, not be too technical, but also just a little bit of a push in case they might forget about these little things. And I think on our side or on the event company side, just a couple of gentle reminders to their speakers, their remote speakers, would actually make them aware, if they're already not aware, to look out for things such as having lighting, great lighting, and keeping it in front of you rather than behind you, because behind you is going to create a silhouette. Also look out for backgrounds that are clean and simple, because these are really simple things that can dictate how the audience views the presenter. These are also things that can help decide where should they actually carry out their presentation. Now, on top of that, I think they should invest a little bit, because of how technology is nowadays. It's pretty low cost to invest in things like a USB lapel mic, for example. That does wonders, I think, as compared to speaking into the laptop's microphone. So making use of a small item like a lapel mic it will do really wonders, and I think essentially cover the main priority of any presentation, which is to send the message across clearly. Yeah.
And so, earlier on you were talking about the background, the lighting, the audio with the microphones that they can get. I believe that when you're talking about people recording their stuff from home, most of them are doing this over their laptops with the built-in webcams. Yeah. Are those okay to use? Should they get, their own cameras? What is the best advice that you can give them?
Generally, laptops these days are good enough. But there are also, like I mentioned, because of how technology is nowadays, also a lot of cost-effective external web cameras that they can call upon and they can purchase at a low cost. Also, once again, will do a lot of magic in improving the clarity of their video feed. You're talking about things like a simple button can actually enhance the person's image. Yeah, there are a couple of image enhancement software is already built into the platform. So explore the platform that is chosen just to see whether these functions are there. Noise cancellation as well. All done by a click of a button. Yeah, so this will also improve. And then also you're looking at if you have some issues doing it live from home, you can actually think about doing it pre-recorded. I think this is something that people may forget about, but pre-recording it and playing it out again is a very viable option, because you have a lot more control over what you do. You can make sure you don't miss out your points that you want to carry out. You can actually edit certain things that you weren't supposed to say. I think overall, importantly, it lets the speaker have a little bit more of that comfort level in order to really carry out their presentation properly. Yeah.
I think I get what you're saying. This whole time you're telling us how production value, enhances the event. Arguably, you can do it without all these things and you can still run an event. Yes. But when you do include all these tips, it makes you look that much better compared to everyone else who's not doing it. Thank you so much for your tips, and we hope to work with you soon.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Augustine, for that. If you just joined us, good morning. Welcome back to our studio. You are joining us on our exploration of events in the new normal and what that means for you. So our next segment covers a very practical topic that maybe many of you might be concerned about these days. What are the cost implications of shifting your event to a virtual space? Well, our next speaker is David Thomas. He's an event manager for the last 20 years, and he's organized all sorts of events, all types and sizes. During his presentation, please feel free to post any questions that you might have for David via the portal on your right side. And David will be around to answer and address all your questions live right here after this.
Thank you, Kim, for that intro, and thanks for reminding us about the poll. We'll get to the results straight after this presentation. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me here today. So far, we've spoken about some of the benefits of going online, the production value, and how some simple gadgets and minor adjustments can improve the look of a presentation. What we'll do now is speak just a little bit about the cost of bringing your event online or running a virtual event. Of course, this is a super broad topic and we don't presume to know all the answers, but I'm sure many of you here today have experience in running events, so I won't dwell too much on what that would entail. Instead, I'll be focusing on some of the specific items and their costs when bringing it online. Yes, the beauty of virtual events is that there are no venue or travel costs, meaning that in their nature, they are likely to be much more cost effective than physical events. That being said, as with all things, quality comes with a price, especially so in a production aspect of doing an online event. But we'll get to that soon enough. So let's talk about the types of virtual events and what they generally cost. These numbers I'm going to present here are based on quotations and estimates received from our vendors and partners, as well as researching easily available information online. For the sake of today's discussion, I've broken down virtual events into three main areas. They are namely 1. Webinars and internal events, 2. Virtual conferences, and 3. Trade shows or exhibitions. Now, there are dozens of ways that these kind of events can intersect by way of definition and program structure, but I think we'll try to keep within these peripherals for today's discussion. So firstly, for webinars, what are they? A webinar, everyone knows it's a combination of the word web and seminar, is a video workshop, lecture or presentation hosted online. Often business related, they last for about 30 to 60 minutes, and they typically use video conferencing tools that allow Q&A, the ability to present live or a pre-recorded video. Some examples would be internal training sessions, product demonstrations, or live workshops, for example. Under the same umbrella of costs that we're going to talk about today would be the other internal events. So what are they? These are town halls, sales kickoffs, trainings, once again trainings, department meetings, annual general meetings or AGMs, and the like. So AGMs were one of the first meeting types to go online and live during the circuit breaker period in Singapore, and the practice might just carry on even past the pandemic, as they've been super successful crossing over to the virtual realm. So even before the current COVID-19 situation, international organizations were already holding internal hybrid events. It was a platform to present a message to the entire company when employees are not all gathered in the same place, or not allowed to for certain situations, say like a pandemic. So for the overview of costs, for a simple webinar, the cost could be as low as $200 to $3,000, with costs mainly going into the subscription fees and for the teleconferencing app or webinar software subscription. You can sometimes get free services if you're happy with the short meeting time and the limited number of people that can join into the meeting and stuff like that. It's also great when exploring the right platform for you, so remember to try before you buy. Popular ones would be Zoom, WebEx, and Webinar Ninja. Yep, that's a thing, and it's a pretty cool one too, so check it out. You probably won't need an event manager or a production company for something like this, just a reliable webinar platform that's easy to use. For the other internal events, let's use the AGM as an example again. It could cost as little as the subscription fees or up to $20,000, depending on how elaborate the reports are and who the board of directors will be reporting to, what kind of image the company wants to portray to its shareholders, and whether or not an event management company is even needed. So for example, using a production company that specializes in streaming videos to set up their equipment in the boardroom can cost the top end of that range, whilst using the Cisco WebEx system for people to call in to present numbers to shareholders would just cost the yearly subscription. So that's why the numbers can be quite vast and very different. So for virtual conferences, what are they? These are the events that require a few more features than webinars. Virtual conferences have an agenda that includes plenaries, keynotes, and breakouts. So like in-person events, they include multi-session breakout content, and most even have an audience interaction system like polls and gamification to keep them engaged. So virtual conferences also allow attendees to interact with other attendees through live chats and private meeting rooms, so they can network as well. So basically, it's kind of like attending a live conference, in-person live conference, except not being able to bump into someone at the espresso machine and talk about how much you love coffee and the buffet here and chit-chat about the business or the company that you represent. We all miss that, I'm sure. It will be coming back, hopefully soon. So for the overview of costs, between $20,000 and $100,000 or higher, depending on the number of speakers, external studios in various countries to record the presentations, the professional hosts if you need it, the IT peripherals and the systems for going live, interaction systems for delegates, multi-room virtual hosting platforms. I think the variations are endless when it comes to this. Although so far I would say a pretty high percentage of the surprise costs would be coming from the studio time and post-event editing. Obviously, the better the production quality, the higher the price can go. So this is not a usual on-site event cost, so it's something to look out for and plan for as well when you're planning to bring your event online. So for the third type of event that I want to speak about would be the trade shows and exhibitions. So what are they? Self-explanatory, I suppose, and these are the large-scale industry conferences or trade shows that usually garner at least 1,500 to 2,000 participants when held as an in-person event. To go online, these kinds of events require higher levels of video production so that virtual attendees provided a similar quality to in-person attendees, especially when going hybrid. So special features could be online virtual booths for the exhibitors, augmented reality capabilities for special products, virtual reality tours, customized apps, and a whole slew of technology to make sure that the event stands out and is memorable for the delegates. Now, it is challenging though to provide the same value at external hybrid events. One of the main reasons for this would be that in-person attendees can network more freely and engage easily with content than those attending virtually. But once again, that being said, it also can be more beneficial being online with the correct strategy. But we'll leave that one for now because we're only running through costs today. So for the overview of costs, for example, with 10 or more speakers, dedicated recording studios, and a professional platform for streaming the event, costs could be in the region of 250,000 and can escalate pretty quickly. With the various requirements like for an online trade show, matchmaking, gamification for delegates, post-event deep data analytics and targeted marketing pre and post-event and so forth, hitting $1 million for an international online conference or trade show is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Okay, so now we've spoken about the general range of costs of virtual and online events. Here are some costs that we just want to highlight while you're planning or thinking about bringing your event online. Firstly, talking about audiovisual or AV. For larger and more complex events, I recommend outsourcing the production work to AV professionals. That's especially if you don't have an in-house team. By doing this, you can focus on the content and speakers while the tech and production side is taken care of. Plus, using a professional AV company makes the whole event look so much more polished and professional. So the second key component for larger events is to have a good video team. You don't need a full-scale production house, but having professionals who can film quality interviews, presentations and panel sessions can make a great deal of difference when presenting the final product to your delegates and online viewers. The post edits are also just as key in keeping the attendees' attention by something as simple as having different camera angles or superimposing stuff like this as I present here. So aside from the smooth running of the event and content development, you're also going to need an IT tech team to help out if anything goes wrong. If this happens, it can be both embarrassing and costly. So investing in a great tech team who can fix anything and everything is really important, and it will ensure your event runs smoothly. So we don't hold back on the safety and backup for physical events when it comes to mitigating Murphy's Law. So I think the same should be done for online events. And now for the most basic but oftentimes overlooked item, ensure you have a good internet facility. You cannot neglect the cost of a good internet. Try to connect via the physical landline, obviously, if you can, and not Wi-Fi. Having a backup is also, a redundancy is also a good idea. It's going to cost you a little more, but it's worth it when it's really needed. So the next thing I wanted to mention would be on the delegates experience. The beauty of going virtual is that you don't have to fork out for any of the printed collateral or goodie bags. Not only does this make your event just a little bit more sustainable, we are all trying to save the planet after all, but it saves money. So example would be some e-vouchers that can be downloaded from by delegates and speakers, for example, to get their caffeinated beverage at their closest Starbucks. So with some planning, this also can be arranged for international delegates. That is, if a Starbucks where they are. So maybe you can budget a percentage of what was going to be spent on the physical event to the online event, like 30 to 50%, for example. Another thing would be, if you do have the budget, another great way to ensure your delegates remember your event for all the right reasons is to weave in an activity post-event. There are all sorts of quizzes, escape rooms, and other team building activities that can be factored into the event. So we've attended and organized as well some events that have used Kahoot as a low-cost feature in their webinars. Used correctly, it can be fun and helps retain information. That's why the kids in Singapore love it when they have to, after their home-based learning and online learning sessions. So the last thing I wanted to mention is certainly one of the most important. Please do budget for the Safe Management Measures, or SMM, that has been mandated by the Singapore Tourism Board and Ministry of Trade and Industry. Guidelines and samples can be found on STB's website, and it's a good place to start when thinking about planning an event up to or past 250 packs moving forward, hopefully. That way there will be no surprises when budgeting for your upcoming event, because there will be costs when it comes to planning of the SMM. You can find out more about this later on in the program when Vincent talks about the SMM and some of its procedures. So in summary, I just wanted to reiterate that going virtual will definitely save on travel, meeting space, on-site staff, badging, printers, and audiovisual rentals and stuff like that. They also mitigate risks associated with travel and many other items that come with organizing a large event. Now, that being said, we do have companies today who are grossly overestimating the savings of moving face-to-face events, either hybrid or totally virtually or to virtual formats. We just have to remember that there will be additional costs that come with producing an event that meets the overall objective in a professional way that befits the image of the company or brand. In the meantime, we're all still finding our footing, but I'm sure we'll come out of this stronger and wiser. So, yeah, so that's all from me. I hope you found this useful. In the meantime, thanks for listening and all the best. Back to you, Kim.
Hi there. Thank you very much, David. Welcome back to the studio, everyone. As promised, David is here right now with me to answer all your questions that you've brought up during his presentation. First off, David, I want to say thank you for taking the time to share that with everyone here today. Now, before we start gathering information from the live audience, I wanted to ask, out of curiosity, what does your event company TMA stand for?
Oh, right. Okay, so TMA basically stands for the MICE Academy. So when we first started, the initial idea was to have a place for budding event managers to come and learn about the nuts and bolts of events. I think theory and case studies are all well and good, but having actual hands-on experience is the best experience to have, basically, to be a good event manager. So also, I think at this point of time, we want to do that school again, but obviously with the pandemic and being busy with client events, we've pivoted a little bit more into virtual events such as this. So that's where we are today.
Right, very interesting. Thank you. I want to ask as well, all right, now we have a few questions from the audience, but we also did a poll during your presentation. So I believe we have the results. Yes. So the question was, do you think virtual events are here to stay permanently? I feel like that's a question that, you know, keeps coming up today.
Yeah.
Maybe people are worried about this. So overwhelmingly, 96% of you sitting at home right now said yes, you think it's here to stay. David, how do you feel about this?
I think that's well, it's reflective of what's happening today. I think also, even if things go back to normal, right? A lot of people have found out, a lot of the event management companies, the marketing companies have found out how positive going virtual can be, because I think whether it's not, it's a bigger reach, whether it's data analytics, as spoken by the panel earlier. So there's a lot of advantages there. But as you can see there, I think even by today's news, Keith Tan from STB's chief, he mentioned today that the tourism industry will not get back to normal in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so all we need to do is just keep on learning and improving ourselves on how to do different events, like this one, for example.
Exactly.
Yep.
So let's move on to the questions that we got from our live audience. So Seok T, thank you very much for your question. Seok T asks, David, for yourself, do you plan an event program based on the budget that's allocated to you?
Right.
Or do you first get the program and then you cost the project?
Oh, okay. A little bit of a chicken and egg issue here.
Yeah.
But to tell the truth, I think most of the time, being informed is the best way to plan this. So for example, if a client has already done an event like this the year before or previous years, you can ask them questions of where they did it, what was their budget, what was their program and stuff like that, and then you can work around that to either improve or keep it in the same range. But if they don't have something like that, I think the first thing to do is find out what their objective is, plan a program based on meeting that objective, and then seeing where the numbers go. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's it. Yeah.
Depends on your client. You need to pick good clients.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Mac. Mac asks, do you think that a virtual event costs more or less than a regular in-person event overall?
Okay, so I think short answer would be virtual event would be cheaper than an in-person event.
Okay.
Okay, but adding on to that, I think you do the savings that you get from travel costs, venue costs, F&B, stuff like that. These savings, I think, need to be put into, well, the production works. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the AV production is one thing. The recording studios you need to book, the post editing and stuff like that. So all in all, I think the savings of having a online event versus a in-person event, maybe you would save 25 to maybe 30%, that kind of range. Not the 50 to 75% that I've been hearing and I've been garnering from others as well. So a little bit more to that is like hybrid events. I think because right now the government has allowed up to 250 packs for the projects going on now with the safety management measures in place, right? So that is another ballgame altogether, because you have to understand that you are doing a physical event. So the costs are already there. You still need to feed your attendees, even though it's a different way of doing it. You still need to pay for the SMM measures. You still need to pay for backdrops and sound systems and all that. Plus, on top of that, you need to prepare for the back-end virtual world, which is the studio sound and the other costs as well. So hybrid events, definitely more expensive. Virtual events, definitely cheaper than in-person events.
You know, based on what you just said and what the panelists were sharing earlier on, it seems like instead of maybe what a lot of clients believe is that a lot of costs disappear because it's a virtual event. I don't think that's the case. It seems like the costs just shift to something else.
That's right.
But they're still there.
Correct.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for your questions. We do have a last one from Sarah. Sarah asks, what are your thoughts on paid virtual events as a way to cover the costs? Do you think that it would deter delegates from attending?
Right, okay. So for this particular question, I think there's a lot of methods on how you can monetize your event, right? Whether it's the content and then you put it on YouTube, and then whether or not you get 1,000 subscriptions or whether or not you get 500 views and stuff like that. That's one way. So that's by creating content, and then you get people to buy into it, and that's how you make a bit of revenue. The other way is to have a, how do you say, a subscription rate. So for example, if you want to buy into the program and you find it a very interesting thing, and then you charge people for events like these, right? So that's a little bit more iffy, because you need to have a back history. You need to have experience in doing this. You need to have a portfolio about doing this. You can't just go ahead and, okay, I'm going to run an event on how wonderful clowns are going to be, you know, and then expect everyone to, oh, I want to pay $20, $30 to watch this. It's so wonderful. So you have to have a track record of having good content, things that people can walk away, you know, knowledge that they can walk away with, and then maybe you can start thinking about paying. So many ways, but to answer the question, yeah, it's a very iffy place to go to, actually.
Yeah, all right. I hope that helped, Sarah. Thank you very much for your question. I think there's one more from Ryan. Thank you for asking your question. Very interesting. Are there any best practices or approaches to engaging the older generation, especially those who are not as tech savvy? It's very interesting. Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, so this one's a bit of a challenge because I'm part of the older generation as well. Right?
What engages you, sir?
So basically, I think when it comes to the so-called older generation, I don't think being not tech savvy is really much of an issue, to be honest, because I think everyone has a handphone, and there are many platforms where you can just click and go into the platform to watch the event. So they've made it as simple as possible. For example, Hopin is pretty good, and then like the ones I mentioned earlier, Zoom is super easy. You just click in and play. But what I think needs to be done to mitigate this is to make sure that your participants, you give them instructions beforehand. For example, you send them, okay, sign into your Hopin account, click here, click there. If you're on mobile, click here. Maybe you can create infographics for them that's easy to follow. But yeah, but aside from, I don't know, sending them to tech school, I don't think that's, yeah, but it's to ensure that it's every step of the way they are taken care of. So you must know who your audience are, is, and then you must also create, you must find the correct platform for the correct audience.
Interestingly, maybe that creates a new role, someone from the team, the event team, to connect with these people and explain things to them. So
that's right.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Ryan. I believe we're almost coming to the end of our time for this segment. And thank you very much for joining us today, for asking the questions. We hope that David was able to answer them. If you do still have questions and we weren't able to reach yours, maybe David will be able to email you right after this event. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us today, for your presentation earlier, and for speaking to our audience. Here to share his tips and safe management measures with us is Mr. Vincent Lim.
Thank you, Kim, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to share with you on the Safe Business event. Okay, basically you all know that in Singapore, government have progressively opened up businesses. So as an event organizer, we need to ensure that the safety of our stakeholder by operating in a safe and a clean environment. Okay. Today I'm going to share with you a few points. Okay, there is a Safe Minds event framework, and then the other one is a Safe Pass Traveler process or requirement that need by the foreign participant. And then the safety management measure they're going to implement at the event. And then lastly, on the post-event report that we need to submit to STP. Okay. Okay, firstly, on this Safe Business Event Risk Management framework, basically it's established by STB in consultation with the industrial player. Okay? Basically, there is a 5-pointer that the event organizer need to comply with. First of all, they need to have an effective called an infection control measure before the pre and the post event. Okay? And then the other thing is also on the limit on the crowd density, and also the individual attendees contact between individual. Okay? And then also ensure that the event is safe for everyone. Lastly, the other one is to make sure to submit a report at the end of the event. This one all the event organizers need to comply with. Okay? And then for the safe travel pass process or requirement, okay, for any foreign participant, okay, you need to have a sponsor from the local company, and this company will apply this called Safe Pass on behalf of the participant. Okay, so once this Safe Travel Pass has been approved, the participant 3 days before they arrive in Singapore, they need to make a health and travel declaration. Then 48 hours before they depart, they need to do a swab test. Okay? Basically, this swab test to ensure that they are in good health condition before they depart. Then on the actual day, the pre-boarding, they need to show the approved safe travel pass, and then the negative result or negative report for this COVID at the swab test, and then also a visa if they need a visa. Okay. So the other thing is that once they arrive in Singapore, they need to do another swab test. Okay? This time, when they are waiting for this swab result, they have to be isolated in the room. Okay? They are not supposed to go anywhere until the result is known. If they show any symptoms of this COVID, they will be confined. Okay? They will not be allowed to go anywhere until it's proven negative. Okay, then when they are in Changi Airport, they need to have transfer to the hotel by a private transport. Okay, they are not allowed to use public transport, and they must strictly follow the itinerary given by the organizer. They also have to download the Trace Together apps. Okay, this is a requirement for everyone to attend this event. Okay. Then they have to go into this private transport wherever they go from hotel to event and event back to the hotel. Okay, they are not supposed to roam around on their own to other itinerary. Okay, as for the control of crowd density, okay, we need to implement safe distancing between individual 1 meter away apart, and then at the same time also must demarcate the 1 meter for the queuing. And then we must ensure that the group gathering among themselves not more than 5. If there is a group, they must have a distancing of 1 meter. Okay, these have to be strictly enforced. As for this close contact between individual, we have to ensure that each cohort or each function room, okay, maximum capacity allowable to date is 50%. Okay, I know the government in October they will increase it to 250, but in the meantime we have to stick to this 50. Each 50% in one cohort can be subdivided into a subgroup. In the subgroup, without more than 20%. Okay, within the subgroup itself, you can break down to a smaller group or discussion group that not more than 5%. Bear in mind that we still need to keep a safe distance of 1 meter between individuals. Even if the table itself you set up, you also have to be 1 meter away from each table. So for the safe and clean environment, we need to have a health declaration from all the attendees. At the same time, we need to implement temperature monitoring. Okay? And then for each individual participant, we need to inform them or to enforce to make sure they have practice personal hygiene. Okay? And then those sanitizer will be installed at those high touch point so the participant can use it. Okay, and then we also make sure that all participants are coming into the event to scan the safe entry. Okay, this one is basically show a floor plan of this conference room. This is just an example. This clearly show what is traffic flow. We have a cohort of 50 person or 50 attendee. Then each has been divided into two groups, the sub cohort A and B. So you can see clearly on the blue arrow is showing for the cohort B flow or how they're going to go into the conference room, dining room, or go to the toilet. Even we also specify where the toilet is. So it's very important to enforce the attendee don't come at the same time. We try to stagger the timing for them to register because we need to control the crowd, and the 1 meter distancing must still be there. In the meantime, you can see some of the emergency exit currently also being barricaded up by the building owner. So under the SETF regulation, you are not supposed to lock the emergency door. If you lock up the door, it's basically a fire hazard. So they want it to be just a barricade there to put a notice board say that in case of any emergency, you can remove the barricade and then you can escape it through the emergency exit door. This is have to be adhered to also by the building owner. Okay, lastly, for the post-event report, SPB require event organizer to send out a report on the 15th or the last day of the event. Okay, basically they want to have the detail of any incident happened during this implementation of this SMM. Okay, and also want to have a photo to show as evidence that you have implement the SMM during the pre-event, post-event, or during the event. Okay, basically just to show evidence what have you done to implement this safe management measure. Okay, then you also have to conduct a survey for the attendee to feedback on the event. The second report will have to be submitted on the 15th after the event. Okay, basically to monitor the health of the attendee, whether it's a local or foreigner. This is to ensure that if any of the attendee display any of the COVID symptom, okay, then we can have to report to the MOH or STB, so they can start the contact tracing. Okay, so this is basically we need to enforce. Although you see that all these measurements can look simple, but when implement it, it will be quite a difficult task. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Emery. Back to the studio.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Now, we have come to the end of today's session on events in the new normal. I want to thank each and every one of you joining us from home, wherever you are, for taking the time to be with us here today, this Friday morning. We really hope that our session today has given you a better idea on the various formats that your virtual event can consist of beyond just the regular things that you're seeing these days. My name is Kim, and I'd like to wish you a great weekend ahead. Stay safe.